Imagine you're in an 1855 gunfight holding what looks like a normal pistol, but you can fire 10 rounds without reloading while your enemy is still trying to ram powder down his single-shot barrel. Except your revolutionary bullets are so weak they bounce off leather coats. Innovation isn't always improvement. Most people think Wild West weapons were just simple six-shooters. They couldn't be more wrong. The frontier was pure chaos, and inventors were creating death machines that sound like something out of science fiction. Today we reveal the top 10 rarest and most brutal Wild West weapons that collectors would literally kill for. Let's kick things off with something that'll make you question everything you thought you knew about Civil War firepower. The LeMat grapeshot revolver? Okay, so imagine you're in a gunfight, right? You've got 9 shots from your revolver, but then, plot twist, you flip a tiny lever and suddenly you're packing a shotgun too. That's exactly what Confederate officers were rocking with this absolute monster. This beast came from the mind of a French doctor living in New Orleans named Jean LeMat. The guy basically said, what if we put a shotgun underneath a revolver? And somehow convinced Confederate General P.G.T. Beauregard to help him make it happen. The result was pure chaos in gun form. 9.42 caliber shots plus one devastating 16-gauge shotgun blast that could literally stop a charging horse. Here's the crazy part. They only made about 2,900 of these things, mostly in French and Belgian factories, while the Union was blockading southern ports. Confederate legends like Cavalry General J.E.B. Stuart and the intimidating Braxton Bragg carried these into battle because when you absolutely need to delete someone from existence, accept no substitutes. But this thing was a nightmare to actually use. It weighed almost 4 pounds loaded, making it heavier than most modern rifles. The accuracy was about as reliable as a politician's promise, especially at any distance beyond spitting range. Reloading it was like performing surgery while being shot at, requiring you to carefully load each chamber individually with powder, ball, and percussion caps. The complex mechanism meant more things could go wrong at the worst possible moment. Gas leakage around the cylinder was common, and the dual barrel system made it prone to jamming when you needed it most. Today, if you can even find one of these mechanical marvels, you're looking at dropping anywhere from $15,000 to $25,000 easy, assuming it's not in a museum somewhere. But Confederate innovation is nothing compared to what the Union was cooking up. The Colt Walker, the wrist breaker. All right, story time. Captain Samuel Walker of the Texas Rangers walks up to Sam Colt and basically goes, "Hey, can you build me something that can kill a man and his horse with one shot?" Colt looks at him and says, "Hold my beer." What they created was literally the most powerful handgun the U.S. military has ever issued. We're talking about a 4.5-pound monster with a 9-inch barrel that fired 44 caliber rounds with the muzzle energy of a modern .357 Magnum. This thing stayed the world's most powerful handgun for an incredible 88 straight years until Magnum cartridges showed up in the 1930s. The Walker could effectively hit targets at 100 yards, which was rifle territory for most handguns of that era. It used 60 grains of black powder per shot, more than double what conventional revolvers could handle. The massive powder charge meant each shot packed enough punch to drop a man, his horse, and probably his horse's cousin too. But here's where it gets spicy. These guns had a charming little habit of exploding in your hands. Not kidding. Almost 300 out of the original 1,000 had to be sent back because their cylinders literally ruptured from the enormous pressures. Imagine quick drawing your sidearm only to have it blow up in your face. Talk about your worst day ever. The explosions happened for several reasons. Primitive metallurgy, soldiers letting powder spill between chambers, causing chain fires, and some genius loading the conical bullets backwards. The weight alone made it impractical for belt carry. Most users mounted them in saddle holsters instead. Now, if you think American engineering was wild, wait until you see what French criminals were up to. The Apache combination weapon, the Transformer. Forget everything you know about normal weapons because this French nightmare is straight out of a steampunk fever dream. Picture a gun that's also brass knuckles, that's also a knife, all folded into one pocket-sized package of pure mayhem. This unholy trinity was the brainchild of Louis Daulne, who patented it in 1869. It became the signature weapon of Parisian street gangs called les Apache, named after Native Americans because apparently their violence was just that brutal. These guys weren't your average pickpockets. They had organized methods of mugging that would make modern criminals jealous. So here's how this mechanical madness worked. The brass knuckles formed the grip when folded. The Pepperbox revolver sat in the middle using pinfire cartridges and a wicked little triangular blade folded out when things got stabby. No barrel whatsoever, no sights, no accuracy beyond arm's reach, but absolutely lethal up close and personal. The pinfire system was revolutionary for its time, using cartridges with little pins sticking out that the hammer would strike to fire the gun. This made it one of the earliest practical self-contained cartridge weapons, decades ahead of most military firearms still using cap and ball. The catch? Well, there were several catches. First, it had no trigger guard or safety mechanism, so smart users left one chamber empty to avoid shooting themselves while it was tucked in their pocket. Second, the thing was wildly inaccurate beyond a few feet. The knife blade was only about an inch long, and switching between weapon modes took precious time during a fight. Manufacturing was crude, and quality control was basically non-existent, meaning these weapons were as likely to malfunction as they were to work properly. The folding mechanism was prone to jamming, especially when exposed to dirt or moisture. By the time you figured out which end to use and got it properly configured, your enemy had probably ventilated you with a regular gun. Speaking of mechanical nightmares, let me blow your mind with America's first rapid-fire disaster, the Volcanic repeating pistol. The beautiful failure. This is the gun that almost revolutionized everything and then face-planted spectacularly. Picture this. It's 1855, and the dynamic duo of Horace Smith and Daniel Wesson decide they're going to create the world's first practical repeating pistol that doesn't rely on multiple barrels. Their masterpiece was a lever-action handgun that could pump out multiple rounds without reloading, using revolutionary rocket ball ammunition. These bullets had hollow bases packed with gunpowder and sealed with primer caps, basically early caseless ammo that was decades ahead of its time. The concept came from Walter Hunt, the same guy who invented the safety pin and sewing machine. The lever action works similarly to modern rifles, with a tubular magazine under the barrel feeding cartridges into the chamber. You could load up to 10 rounds in the larger models and fire them as fast as you could work that lever. The ammunition was completely waterproof, which was huge when paper cartridges would turn into mush if you looked at them wrong. The concept was absolutely brilliant. Imagine walking into a saloon standoff with what looked like a normal pistol but could fire repeatedly while your opponent was still trying to reload his single-shot weapon. Plus, the lever action was smoother and faster than the manual cocking required by most revolvers of the era. But then reality came knocking with a sledgehammer. The rocket ball ammunition was weaker than a disappointed father. We're talking about 56 foot-pounds of energy, which is less than a modern .25 pocket pistol. There are literally reports of outlaws laughing as volcanic rounds bounced off their heavy leather coats like pebbles. The limited space inside the bullet base meant you could only pack a tiny amount of gunpowder, resulting in pathetic velocities and practically no stopping power. The gun was also prone to gas leakage, misfires, and jamming when dirt got into the complex mechanism. Now let's talk about something that didn't need fancy mechanisms to ruin your day. The Arkansas toothpick. The Silent Reaper. This wasn't a gun, but it was every bit as deadly and twice as personal. We're talking about a double-edged fighting knife that stretched anywhere from 12 to 20 inches of pure killing intent, designed for one purpose: creating very large, very fatal holes in other human beings. The name toothpick was frontier humor at its darkest. These weren't for picking teeth unless you wanted to pick them from the inside. Unlike your typical frontier knife that could chop wood, skin game, or fix your gear, the Arkansas toothpick was a surgical instrument of death with no other purpose. That needle-sharp point could punch through any clothing, leather armor, or thick winter coats like they weren't even there. The double edges meant every thrust created wounds that would never heal properly, ensuring that even non-fatal strikes could prove deadly through blood loss or infection. The length gave you significant reach advantage over opponents with shorter blades. The beauty of it was psychological warfare. You could wear one openly without looking like a maniac, since every frontiersman carried a blade of some kind. But experienced fighters knew the difference between a tool and a weapon just by looking. The toothpick's profile screamed, "I'm here to kill people," to anyone who understood steel. These knives became particularly popular in the Arkansas Territory during the 1830s, where law was more of a suggestion than a reality. Dueling with toothpicks became common enough that many saloons and gambling houses banned them entirely. The wounds they inflicted were so distinctive that coroners could often tell what weapon was used just by examining the body. The downside was pretty obvious. This thing was absolutely useless for anything except ending people. Couldn't use it around camp for normal tasks, couldn't skin your dinner without ruining the blade, and that delicate point would snap against bone if you hit it wrong or tried to pry something with it. All right, let's get back to firearms with something that makes everything else look like a water pistol. The Howdah pistol, the portable cannon. This absolute unit started life in British India, where colonial officers needed something that could stop a charging tiger, rhinoceros, or angry elephant dead in its tracks. What they created was essentially a double-barreled hand cannon that fired 577 Nitro Express rounds, cartridges originally designed to drop Cape buffalo and Bengal tigers with authority. The name came from the Howdah, the platform mounted on elephants where British officers would sit during hunts. When a wounded tiger decided to climb up and join the party, your standard service revolver might as well have been harsh language. The Howdah pistol was the nuclear option for close encounters of the fanged kind. When these monsters made their way to American shores, Wells Fargo guards and anyone facing serious threats quickly realized they'd found the ultimate problem solver. Picture this scenario. You're guarding a stagecoach full of gold when a gang of outlaws decides to rob you. While they're expecting you to draw a normal six-shooter, you instead produce what amounts to portable artillery disguised as a handgun. The stopping power was absolutely biblical. These weren't pistols. They were handheld howitzers that could punch through multiple attackers with one shot. The massive bullets weighed as much as some complete cartridges from other guns, and they carried enough energy to knock a man clean off his horse even with a non-fatal hit. But Newton's third law is a harsh mistress. The recoil could break wrists, dislocate shoulders, and launch you backward off your horse if you weren't properly braced. Most users got exactly one shot before their pistol became a very expensive club. The sound alone was enough to make horses bolt, and grown men reconsider their life choices. Now let's talk about a weapon that tried to solve the firepower problem with pure chaos: the Pepperbox revolver, the spray and pray special. Before Sam Colt perfected the revolving cylinder, gunsmiths were experimenting with some seriously wild ideas. The Pepperbox revolver was basically what happened when someone said, "What if we just stuck a bunch of barrels together and hoped for the best?" The result was mechanical chaos that somehow worked most of the time. These mechanical monsters typically featured 4 to 6 rotating barrels that would fire in sequence, or sometimes all at once if things went sideways. Each barrel was essentially its own gun, complete with its own chamber and firing mechanism. For stagecoach guards and saloon owners facing multiple attackers, this was like having a handheld Gatling gun that fit in your holster. The concept was pure genius for close-range mayhem. Pull the trigger and one barrel fires, rotate to the next chamber, pull again. But sometimes multiple barrels would discharge simultaneously, turning your controlled shot into a devastating spray pattern that could clear a room faster than you could say, "Everybody duck." Loading was an adventure in itself. You had to charge each barrel individually with powder, wadding, and ball. Then cap each nipple with a percussion cap. This process took forever and required you to be extremely careful not to mix up which barrels were loaded. Getting it wrong could result in dangerous misfires or accidental discharges. but Pepperboxes were mechanical nightmares waiting to happen. All those barrels made them front heavy and about as balanced as a drunk cowboy trying to walk a straight line. The weight distribution was terrible, making accurate shooting nearly impossible beyond a few yards. Misfires were tragically common, and when one barrel fired while others didn't, the unequal forces could literally blow your fingers off or destroy the weapon entirely. Chain fires, where sparks from one barrel ignited neighboring chambers, could turn your gun into a hand grenade without warning. Let's pivot to something a bit more refined, but equally deadly: the Philadelphia Derringer, the gentleman's assassin. Don't let the size fool you. This little pocket rocket was responsible for one of the most famous assassinations in American history. Henry Derringer's compact single-shot pistol became the weapon of choice for gamblers, ladies of society, and anyone who needed discreet but deadly protection in an era when personal disputes were settled with lead. These pocket-sized powerhouses typically fired .41 caliber rounds from barrels only 2 to 3 inches long, somehow packing surprising punch into an incredibly concealable package. The short barrel meant reduced velocity, but at the close ranges where Derringers were used, it hardly mattered. You could hide one in a boot, up a sleeve, or in a lady's purse without anyone being the wiser. The craftsmanship was exquisite. These weren't crude weapons, but finely made instruments with walnut grips, engraved silver mountings, and precision rifling. Many were sold in matched pairs in velvet-lined cases, marketed as gentlemen's weapons for those occasions when honor demanded satisfaction. The Derringer's claim to infamy came on April 14, 1865, when John Wilkes Booth used one to assassinate President Lincoln at Ford's Theater. That single .44 caliber shot changed American history forever and cemented the Derringer's reputation as the ultimate close-range assassination tool. The gun was so small that Booth easily concealed it while approaching the president's box. Professional gamblers absolutely loved these things because they could stay hidden until the exact moment they were needed. During high-stakes poker games where fortunes changed hands and tempers ran hot, a concealed Derringer was the ultimate insurance policy against cheaters and sore losers. Many gambling establishments tried to ban them, but their small size made enforcement nearly impossible. Finally, let's wrap up with the weapon that actually did change everything: the Henry rifle, the Sunday gun. Here's the weapon that truly revolutionized frontier warfare and earned itself a legendary nickname: the gun you load on Sunday and shoot all week. This lever-action beauty could pump out 15 rounds of .44 rimfire ammunition without reloading, giving whoever carried it an absolutely devastating advantage in firepower that bordered on unfair. While Confederate forces were still fumbling with single-shot muskets and muzzle-loading rifles, Union soldiers who privately purchased Henry rifles could lay down continuous rapid fire that sounded like a one-man army. The psychological impact was enormous. Imagine hearing one enemy soldier firing nonstop while you're desperately trying to reload your single-shot weapon with a ramrod and loose powder. The Henry used reliable .44 rimfire cartridges, which were light years ahead of the experimental ammunition that doomed earlier repeaters like the Volcanic. This reliability made it the first truly practical repeating rifle that could handle frontier abuse and keep working when your life depended on it. The cartridges were also much more powerful than previous attempts, with enough punch to drop game or stop attackers effectively. Unlike the complex, failure-prone mechanisms of earlier designs, the Henry's lever action was elegantly simple and soldier-proof. The toggle link action was smooth as silk when properly maintained, and the gun could be field-stripped and repaired with basic tools. This was crucial when the nearest gunsmith might be hundreds of miles away across hostile territory. The tubular magazine system meant you could load the gun once and fight for an extended period without stopping. The brass frame earned it the nickname Yellow Boy among some users, and the distinctive appearance made it instantly recognizable on the frontier. The Henry's influence can't be overstated. It directly evolved into the Winchester models that dominated the post-Civil War West. Its basic operating principle became the template for every lever-action rifle that followed: proving that repeating firearms weren't just possible, they were inevitable. And there you have it, folks. 10 weapons that shaped the Wild West in ways your history books conveniently forgot to mention. From French criminal masterpieces to Confederate innovations to the rifles that literally built Winchester's empire, these weapons prove that the frontier was basically one giant laboratory of deadly creativity. Which of these mechanical marvels blew your mind the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you want more forgotten firepower and historical insanity, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell, because we're just getting started.